I suppose pretty well anywhere you look in society today, people need some form of help, and we're probably more aware of it than we ever were. But are we doing it right? I'm joined this morning by Fleur Sexton. She works with young people most of the time, and we're going to talk about the problems that they face in terms of stress and mental health. Once upon a time, if a teenager said they were stressed, they'd be get a clip round the ear and told to get on with it, wouldn't they?
Yeah, I think it's definitely something now that people are more aware of, that people need to take seriously, and it's something that we need to address and deal with. So I think it's great that young people feel they've got to get on with things and not dwell on little problems, but there's a big difference between ignoring signs of mental health issues or depression that can so easily be fixed if caught early enough.
Because particularly at that sort of age, formative years, 13, 14, 15 onwards, very small, simple things can become big for them, can't they?
Definitely. Yeah, I was reading this thing that all about teenage brain, that new research that they've done that says that the idea of the perspective that adults can put on things, teenagers don't have that, it's still developing. So little things can actually seem big. I mean, I don't understand the science of it, but it makes a lot of sense, you know, that teenagers, they worry a lot about things. You've got all these new responsibilities and all these new things coming into their world and exams that they've got to deal with. And I think this idea about helping them to actually become life ready, not just employment ready, is really important.
Because that's one of the great criticisms, isn't it? That the biggest single failing many people think in the senior school curriculum is that we prepare them academically, but no more.
Yeah, I think it's becoming a lot more. I think people are a lot more aware of it at the minute, and I think the government, because they've just put 1.4 billion, it's amazing, a huge amount of money into addressing teenage mental health. And I think this is really, really good, because you know there is this issue about, yes, they're work ready, yes, they've got their exams, that's fantastic, but it's the emotional IQ that is so important, that you know teachers are under a massive pressure to get them through their exams, but that causes a lot of stress in itself, and I think it's just getting that balance, isn't it?
So where do you, from your standpoint, Fleur, where do you look at them and think, no, this isn't just a bit of teenage angst, that there is a problem here?
I think it's the sort of signs that when we're working with young people, the sort of signs that we would see would be if they're very withdrawn, if there's a change in the way they are. So if they're generally quite outgoing, but then they become withdrawn, and that obviously a change in behaviour. Also things like anything to do with you know, if they're not eating, if they're self-harming, obviously that's a very serious one. But I think when they start to internalise problems, that's when I would be starting to get worried, because as long as they're communicating, it's still difficult to tell, because a lot of teenagers can mask if they're not coping too well, because they just talk to her. I think it's human nature, isn't it? You tend to mask things, but I think changing behaviours is a big thing.
Because I mean, your background is an educational trainer and provider and motivator and all the rest of it. So what got you from there to worrying about teenagers, if I can put it that way?
Well, because we work with them all the time, it's just looking at the sort of more holistic picture, the bigger picture, in terms of, you know, what is important for them to actually do well. And I think a big part of when you're looking at their exams and getting them confident and motivating them in their exams, then you start looking at what are these barriers to them doing well, and one of them is stress. Stress is a big barrier to young people doing well, so that's how we sort of started getting into this, and we've come across some amazing people. One of the most amazing ones, I would say, is the parents of this young man called Cameron Grant, who've set up a memorial fund, because he very sadly he took his own life just after he was 21, and he'd suffered a lot with depression for some years with depression, but he'd covered it up, you know, as young people do, and they're doing amazing work now, raising awareness for they call it like mental health first aid, and it's amazing, because the idea of spot something in a young person and then get somebody to actually pass it on, signpost it to people who can help. And I think this idea that we don't have to be experts, but just to be able to, they're training, for example, doing a lot of training with community leaders, group leaders, to try and get them to be able to spot this. And I think these things that people can do are very important, so you know, we try and support that sort of thing.
I suppose the one thing that might worry some people is that you can look at them and think, right. It's a bit like being given, have you got any of these symptoms, and you tick more than two, oh, well, you've got this. Is there a danger, I suppose another way of putting it might be to overplay it and suggest that there is a problem when there isn't?
I think so. Yeah, that's a good point, because it's difficult. It's just like if somebody's got something like measles or something. It's very hard to know if you're not an expert. So I think it's just about being vigilant. Just to keep communication going. I think that's the thing.
And are they reluctant to talk about it as well?
I think teenagers, yes, definitely. I think they become quite private. I think as they're getting more independent, which is good. It's just part of growing up. But I do think just keeping communication going any way we can, and just keep trying different things. I think one of the things that I would say from we work with thousands of teenagers, and I think the crucial thing for me is that there's no one way, and I think we're always, as parents and teachers, we're always just learning ourselves and trying to do our best, because there's so many different types of responses from young people, and it's just always about just trying to keep communication going, I'd say.
So once you got into this area, it sounds as though it's kind of really taken over.
Yeah, I think the work in the schools with young people, and we work with people in schools, young people in schools who are working towards their exams, and really under the stress of exams, really in that
Yes.
process, but also young people who've left who maybe don't know what they want to do with their lives, and that in another way, a completely different situation, but that's stressful as well. I think life does come with a certain amount of natural stress, and it's just about teaching them ways of dealing with that, and trying to find coping mechanisms, I suppose.
How much does social media play a part in all of this, do you think?
Oh well, I think it's got two sides to it, actually, because on the one hand it can be really good that people can be less isolated, and I think people can, if they don't feel necessarily they want to talk to a real person about something, I think they can look up a lot of different people who have had different situations, etc. That's a good thing, but I think a bad thing is I think it can cause quite a lot of stress in itself. I think it can make life a lot faster, and I think it brings its own issues. I think social media, in that it gets them into trouble sometimes, and that can cause its own stress. So it's one of them. Most things, isn't it? It's got a flip side. So the good thing has also got something not so good attached.
When does stress become a mental health issue? Where is the line between the two?
Well, I think it's about, for me, working with young people, I think it's about when it becomes something that impacts on their daily life. I think a certain amount of stress is normal, that we can deal with. I suppose it's when it becomes something that they can't deal with, that they don't know how to handle. That's when it would become an issue, I would have thought. I mean, I'm not an expert on the mental health side of it, but working with teenagers, I'd say if they don't have those skills to deal with it, that's when I'd be worried.
Do you think that they will find it easier to talk to somebody like yourself about these problems sometimes, rather than parents or teachers?
I'm not sure, actually. I think sometimes, I suppose, if it's somebody that they're working with who's not part of their everyday life, it can be easier. But I think it's about having... it's easy to say, it's about having those channels open that you can communicate, but I think sometimes, the teenagers don't necessarily want to chat about things, especially of a personal nature. So I think the fact that the government is introducing all of these, either this massive big website idea that has got loads of different ways for young people to get in touch with people or to access help, I think that's really, really good. Different methods, so it's something to appeal to all different types, because there's not one size fits all. So I think that's really good move.
Do you ever find yourself, when you're talking to youngsters today, thinking, I would never have thought like this when I was that age?
I don't think a lot's changed in a lot of ways.
Right.
I think they think it has. I think young people think, they probably think it's like a million years ago when people that are their teachers were at school. But I think, in a sense, not a lot has changed, because it's still the same issues about growing up, about exams and sort of all the things that come with growing up, and all the stresses and strains and all the exciting things as well. I think a lot of it hasn't changed, but I do think life is a lot faster. So I think they've got it harder now in a way.
Do we expect more of them, do you think?
Oh, definitely. I think so. I think so. I think there are a lot more. I think schools are under a lot more pressure. I think there's a lot more pressure in that sense. So I think they're under a lot more pressure as a result. I mean, teachers are under more pressure nowadays. So I think that's also an issue for the young people, because it's all part of having to get those exams, which it's a competitive world, you know. So it is hard for them, yeah, but exciting as well.
Yes, and quite briefly, but you have a son who's a teenager. Do you find yourself sort of like this, watching him all the time?
Well, the thing with him, he's 16, my son, and he's pretty good at communicating, and I think I'm really glad of that. But
you sit him down like this and talk to him. I can see
I
it
might try.
I was going to say you're an ambassador for Coventry, but you're not anymore. You're a champion, aren't you?
Yeah.
Is that much the same thing?
Yes, it is. It's basically a group of people that all come together that all really support the city, Coventry and Warwickshire, and really want to support the initiatives for business and for doing business. One of the things that we all believe is that it is the best place to do business in the UK, because it's very supportive. There's always initiatives going on. There's you know, from the Chamber of Commerce, the council, local authority, there's a huge amount of support, and I think that's something that we all just want to shout about. So
is it a hard sell?
No, it's just, I think they meet monthly, and it's just about different people who are in the city, who love the city and Warwickshire, talking about what they do and initiatives that are going on. So it's just people who all love where they live and work, and yeah, sort of sharing the good news, really. So it's nice.
And I presume at the moment they're all sharing the good news that the football team are top of the table, aren't they?
Yeah, very good, yeah.
On the way back, but will it be you maybe know, are they going to stay at the Ricoh Arena, or are they still going to build their own place as they keep
I don't know,
No?
actually. I mean, there's so much exciting stuff going on, and I'm not too sure on that one, but it's good to be following it and see that they're doing well, so yeah.
I mean, it is always a selling point, isn't it, when you were so close to a motorway as well? I mean, you've got the M6 going across the top end, and you've got the M45 and all sorts of things, because getting from A to B and all the rest of it, I mean, we're an impatient bunch of people these days, aren't we?
So
we have to be able to get...
Yeah, definitely. It does matter, because we've got an office up in Sheffield as well, and so we're based in Coventry, but we've got an office in Sheffield. It's only an hour and a half up the motorway, but we can be in London in an hour as well, so it's absolutely spot on for us. So yeah, it's lovely. A good place.
So tell me about your business then, how you grew this, because you've been going, what, 20 years?
20 years this year, yeah. It's been, well, we started off, I used to be a French teacher, and my husband, he used to do IT, he was a software engineer, and I was teaching, and it just seemed, I was working at Exwell Grange in Coventry, and I'd worked in a school in Paris where I was teaching children who English was their third language, so they got Arabic, they got French, you know, to a greater or lesser degree, and then they were learning English. So it was just about, we got really interested in the whole idea of barrier breaking, you know, using different approaches, starting to use computers, because that was all starting to come in at that point, but only on floppy disk. So we started making products that would make it easier and get children really interested in learning languages. So that's how it all started, but it was just, it was a solution to a problem. And I think that's a really good way to start a business, just to do something you're passionate about and actually try and fix a problem, rather than start a business as something in its own right. And it just went from there, really. And
I guess 10 days ago, you know, you must have wept at the way Paris was defiled.
Oh, terrible, absolutely terrible. So tragically sad. Just awful. You know, it's such a beautiful city, and so many, it's just so wonderful they accept everybody, you know, every different belief and type of person is accepted. So it was a terrible thing, and, you know, really so sad for the people who've done everything to build that city up into what it is. So yeah, very, very sad.
But when you came back, you set this business up. Now, I've struggled with getting this right. Is it PET11 or PETXi?
PETXi.
PETXi,
yeah.
Right.
So,
and why PETXi? Because I've been struggling to try and work that out as well.
Well, when we started, it was progressive educational tools, because it was all about creating tools for teachers to use. So in the early days, it was all about products before we got into the actual training side of things. But that was a bit of a mouthful to say, and everybody would just call us PET. And then the XI that stands for explosive inspiration. So it's all about that moment of really understanding, really getting the momentum and really believing you can do it. And that's the point we get the young people to when they're on a course with us. So PETXi is very much about getting them to really believe they can do it and get the push to really make it happen.
So is it schools and further education colleges that come to you? I mean, I know it's not just around Coventry, it's around the whole country, isn't it? Do they come to you and say, look, we not so much that they're disaffected, but we need to engage them more, to push them more?
Yeah, they'll often come to us like just before exams, or if they've worked really hard and they've done really well, but they're not quite at the point of being exam ready. So we'll probably meet them when they're stuck at a grade D and they really need to push up to a grade C. So it's a combination of confidence. They might have missed a bit of time. They might just not have grasped concepts completely. They might have English as a second language. A lot of our students may have that as an issue as well. So we put on very intensive courses. A lot of staff will be on the course with specific skills. So if there are, say there's quite a few Polish children in a group, we'll put on staff who can speak Polish as well, just to speed up the ability they have to grasp the material quickly. So it's all about getting them to understand and really take on a lot of information, get them exam ready.